everybody, and thank you again for staying with us at this late hour. First, I would like to thank really organizers and DICRO for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And we heard a lot today about data also really that we miss. I'm not going to talk which trials we need, but I would like to bring some light on this, how you can include patient representatives and patient voice into design and conduct of the trials. So these are my disclosures. First, few words about Europadona, the European Breast Cancer Coalition. Europadona is an umbrella organization for addressing the breast cancer, and we have 47 member countries, as you can see by this map, across the Europe, like WHO defines the Europe. We still miss 5 countries in this area. We do a lot of advocacy, especially on European level, but we share also accurate information. We educate and train our national representatives and delegates, and we are very tightly involved in clinical research. So our main mission is to ensure that all people in Europe will have access to accurate information and quality of screening, diagnosis, and treatment at the time that they really need it. These are our 10 goals that all our national organizations adopt and then address through their work. This is addressing everything from early detection, screening, treatment, research in the field of breast cancer, for healthcare professionals and for patients and lay public. So for the past 20 years, we've been strongly advocating for bringing patient voice more closely. We now know that patient-relevant endpoints are already included in the clinical trials, and we needed quite some time that patient representatives had an open door to scientific meetings like also this today. And we finally reached the point where patient representatives are also included in the trial designs. We know that EMA already adopted this initiative, that new trials should have patient representative at least in steering committees or in ethical boards. And also European Union brought that in the last call for European projects, that bringing patient organization on board gives additional points to the project. So regarding this, the whole community, not just patient organizations, but also research organizations, healthcare professionals, policymakers, industry, got together almost 3 years ago during the presidency to European Union in the triple countries, Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia, and more than 130 people from 14 different countries worked together in the meetings to conduct and to bring together principles of successful involvement of patients in the cancer research. We published this in September 2021, and DMA adopted these principles just two months later. So now you can find also these recommendations on their website. I would just like to briefly take you through this document. It's only 14 pages. It's available openly. It's really not so complicated. It's only 6 chapters. And at the end, we agreed that it's really nothing revolutionary that we didn't know already. But where to start? Of course, at the beginning, at the brainstorming, with the shared decision, involving either patients, caregivers, patient advocates. Who could this be? Someone with a personal experience or some professional that really understands this landscape. Focusing on the actual needs and demands of the targeted group and not conduct the trial just for trial itself to prove something that maybe we already know. And involving not just patients, but also other stakeholders, and have an equal rights on the boards. In some trials, we still have patient representatives in the steering committees, but these patient representatives don't have voting rights, which is very nonsense to have a patient around the table if they are not allowed to vote. The second chapter is about the strategy level and timing of involvement. So involvement in really early processes is crucial, because once the protocol is already accepted and approved by ethical committee, it's really hard or barely any way to go back and to make a new trial design, because if the trial is in 3 countries, you have to deal with at least 3 boards to approve this protocol again. So again, making a decision-making power, I'll go back to that voting right. If you have a patient voice around your table at your committee, you should consider this person equal to other professionals in your team. So match the right person with the right project. Don't invite a lung cancer patient to breast cancer committee, or vice versa. Breast cancer patient or caregiver to hematological some projects. It's really important to get someone who knows the topic that we are talking about and to bring this person in the cycle of the research all the time. So in some cases, we see that expert organizations like BIG, Big Against Breast Cancer, already established their patient advisory boards that are a group of patient advocates, of almost 20 patient advocates from all around the world, that are a consultancy body of the BIG, and every project before is going to the scientific committee for the discussion is first presented to that board. Of course, accessibility to and participation in international and multi-center clinical studies should be offered to all countries that are participating. But we know that in some trials that are ongoing in 20 or 30 countries around the world, this is really hard, but at least then include more than 1 patient representative on board. Communication, understanding, and relationship is again very important. Communication not just within the consortium or your group of experts, but also all the materials that are prepared for committees and for patients should be in an understandable language. So sometimes we joke that we translate a medical language to lay language, and that's actually a very important thing. You can put some very nice words into your trial design protocols, but patients don't understand them. When you will introduce that protocol to them, they will just nod and they will agree with you, but they don't have a clue what you are talking about. Sometimes just ask them to summarize what you told them, and that's such an easy test to see if they really understand you. And in trials, this is even more important, because everybody wants very good data and very relevant data coming out of the trials. Resources, knowledge and skills. It's again, this is a little ball to our side, to patient organizations, that we are actually feasible to have people in our community that are eligible to join this kind of boards. You can actually pick a person in your waiting room or in the street, and you can say, oh, I have a patient representative or a consumer representative in my board. But you actually want someone who understands. This doesn't need to be a scientist, but someone who understands what's the trial about, what the data would bring, and of course, what that would clinically mean for other patients and for patients that will be not just in the trial, but when the trial is finished. Methods and approaches are not just methods that are important for the clinical research itself, but it's also including other stakeholders, like getting funding for the trial, and also to make everything understandable to those authorities, and they have also the role of funding what do we want to do. It's not always the industry that funds the trial, especially the trials that are maybe locally conducted or in some very specific, either surgical and also radiotherapy is one of these issues that are rising. And also with the trials within Europe, I'm going to talk about Europe, it's also an opportunity to overcome the inequalities that we have in the research and access to the treatments. Last chapter, but not least, definitely is ethical and legal aspects. We are, well, probably most of us, even though my husband is a lawyer, so I shouldn't talk about them a lot, but this is definitely a thing that we have to address, and to keep it ethical, and to inform people about the data, and never forget that all data that we share, also all of you, once you go to your doctor, you share all of your data, it's still your data. And those numbers are still people, and not just something that can go around and be locked in a trial and not shared for another analysis like EBCTCG is doing. So this is another aspect to take this from the very beginning. Of course, all the sponsors want the data for themselves, but sometimes they tend to forget that this data still belong to the patient that was in the trial. I think that Germany is really a leader in this GDPR area in Europe, and most of the countries are not so rigid about it, but it is a thing that needs to be discussed, and it is something that we have to take into account where we are designing our trials. So now to more practical thing, how to really pick someone that you want to have in your either hospital or in your trial or in your community. So first you have to know if you really want someone to bring their perspective, or you want just to tick a box. If you just want to tick a box, pick someone random on the street and you're done. Or if you really want to bring the real world perspective and what is relevant to the patients and endpoints or questions, answering the questions that are relative to the real world and to patients, then try to find a patient organization either in your area or in your country. I'm sure that most of the countries in the world have patient organizations, especially in oncology. But then it's again on our side as a patient organizations to provide people and to identify people if we are invited. Who is the right person? Maybe this one in the middle, on the left, on the right, who could sit in that boards, but not just sit there, but really bring the effective work or to bring the perspective of the community to the trial. One very, very important question is that we are facing as a patient organization, that usually they ask us for a cancer survivor or a patient or a person who has experience with the disease. But not always that is a good choice. Sometimes even caregivers, co-survivors, or professional patient advocates are far more better representatives than patients that are, let's say, less than 2 years since their diagnosis. This kind of people are usually too emotional, and they go a little bit more to the personal side, and they don't see the community and other patients because they are looking at the case through their personal experience and their personal eyes. Of course, during this past 2 decades, several organizations developed their trainings and education how to train lay people and people that are not healthcare professionals to understand all of this. I listed just a few of them, and I'm sure that you're familiar with most of them. EUPATI is European Patient Academy that was initially started by European Patient Forum, and they also have their own trainings. Also Europadona, ECO, ERTC, WeCan Academy, ESMO, ECHO, Eurodis, BIG, everybody have their own programs that we can share and that we actually send our people to go and get the trainings about how to read scientific paper, how to understand statistics, how to understand the clinical relevance of the trial, and again, ethical and all other aspects. And to share this information, not just with them, but with the whole community. And why this is important, not just for themselves, but for future patients also. And of course, knowing the landscape. This is a very important thing. If they are not aware of it, it really doesn't make any sense. So what is our advantage as a patient organization? We have 47 member countries, that's almost 1 billion people. And we collaborate also with other continents, especially with North America, less with others. I mentioned that we have also within Europadona our own programs and our own materials that were developed with with healthcare professionals and are available for everybody on our websites. We have special trainings. We have yearly advocacy training for new patient advocates. We have every 2 years advocacy leaders trainings for leaders of national organizations. We are co-organizer of EBCC, European Breast Cancer Conference, from the very beginning, and we always have patient track within it, also within ESMO conference and some other conferences. So there are availabilities, and people can get this data. These are some of the projects, trials, and initiatives that Europa Donna is the coalition and national members are part of. I already mentioned BIG, EBCTCG, OPBC, and some Horizon projects, some EU projects that were starting this year and last year, also Europa Trial, Eurobreast, EBCC Council, and other expert groups. It's not easy to cover all of this because we still miss a lot of patients who would be willing to do that job. But luckily, we have this great network or puzzle that we can address every single time and get people to go to these meetings. And for the end, I would like to ask myself if I am the right candidate to still do this, what I do, or should I really move on? So this is my biggest disclosure. I was diagnosed with breast cancer almost 15 years ago when I was 26. I was a PhD student of endocrinology and molecular behavioral neuroscience. I'm a veterinarian by my professional background. And I did a lot of these trainings that I mentioned earlier. I'm now lecturing most of them. I'm in daily contact with new patients, and I'm realizing that my interests and my questions are far more different than theirs. My mother is currently on a treatment for melanoma, and I went with her to all her doctor's visits. I had tens of questions about her treatment. She had only one. Her question was if she's immunosuppressed, or she can go with her friends out and visit her daughters and go with public transport. And her doctor said, no, you're not. You can live your life whatever you want. I was like, okay, you need to shut up. Don't ask other questions. That's all she wants to know. She didn't ask about survival rate, about success of the treatment, or oh yeah, she knows it's going to be for a year, but that's it. And she's coming every 3 or 4 weeks whenever she gets the date. And that's the thing that she is interested in, but she's not interested in overall survival and in success rate of her treatment. And that's her right. And that's all she needed to know. And then a few weeks ago, we had in our kindergarten afternoon with grandparents, and I said to her, she just finished radiation therapy, and I just said to her, just stay, you know, there will be children, they will grab you or whatever. And she said, oh, but I don't know if I'll be still alive next year, so I'm going. I was like, what? Of course you'll be. Your prognosis is great, you know. So she's like, I'm going. And again, that's okay. She should go. But I had to convince myself that that's okay. So taking this into account, I asked myself, do I know too much? And should I move to the other side? Well, definitely, this is from my PhD defense, and 3 of these ladies are no longer with us. Still, a lot of women die of breast cancer. Even though we are so many, and 5-year survival rate is so high. But what's 5 years? I just told you, I'm almost 15 years since my diagnosis, and the prognosis at that time wasn't so brilliant. So we just don't want to survive. We want to live on. Philip earlier mentioned, so do we overtreat? We hate, Charlotte earlier mentioned, we hate de-escalation word or terminology. So getting really the treatment that you need at the time that you need, how to stratify and how to identify the patient that will really benefit from the treatment? This is the question we want to answer. On this picture, we are 4 very young breast cancer patients. 2 of us were diagnosed at 26 and 2 at 31. Definitely that is not the age of getting breast cancer, but we got it anyway. 3 of them are BRCA carriers. 1 is now on the treatment for ovarian cancer. So bringing all this up front was that we need more information. And since I'm a vet, of course, I always wanted a dog. And I have it now. She's an old dog. She's now 14 years old. I got it after my cancer because before that, my mother tried to convince me that dog cannot live in a small apartment, but she lives on a couch and she's very happy. So in 2008, when I was diagnosed, fertility preservation was not so common and was not routinely offered to young patients. And my doctor said to me, my oncologist said to me, oh, you're so young, even if we give you 10 years of tamoxifen. At first she said 5, then she said 7, and then it was 10. She said, oh, you'll be still young. And I was very happy with that answer. But after 2 years, I started to question myself. What did chemo to my body? What did all the hormonal treatment? And oops, after 10 years, I'll be 37. Even healthy women in that age. It's not so common to get pregnant easily. I found out that as a cancer survivor, I cannot get a health certificate, and I'm not eligible to adoptions. I cannot adopt a child since I cannot get a health certificate that I'm healthy. My doctor said, oh, I'll write that. And I said, are you crazy? You're actually risking your job and your career? But she said, oh, who will check that? So this is another question. Okay, I cannot get insurance. I barely can get any loans. That's why right to be forgotten and data, when are we really cured, is so important. But let me just finish. My story is not so bad at all. So 2.5 years ago, I had a great opportunity that I delivered a healthy baby. Olivia Pagani calls her tamoxifen baby because she tried to convince me, and Sibyl Leubel, every single time she met me, she asked me, you're still not pregnant? I said, no, I will finish 10 years of tamoxifen. So I was in positive trial in the steering committee from the very beginning. I knew everything, and most of them said to me, forget everything you know, just get off tamoxifen and get pregnant. But it's hard to forget everything you know. So bringing this fertility preservation in my country as a clinical pathway that needs to be done in 24 hours was one of my first mission. And since 2013, we have it in Slovenia, but still in other European countries, that's not the case. So if you need us, these are my contacts. But I'm very bad in responding because I'm in many of those trials and groups that I show you. So I suggest just contact our head office in Milan, and we will help you if you would like to include a patient representative who really knows what's the need and what's the patient perspective for breast cancer. Don't contact us for other types. So that's it. Thank you.